Drop the equipment right now, set it down and step back. This is my equipment, I'm filming a documentary. Nobody who looks like you owns gear like this. Set it down or I'm taking it as evidence of theft.
I need you to tell me what crime has been committed.
The crime is you having $20,000 of camera equipment in this neighborhood.
That's what's suspicious.
Officer Brett Saunders, badge number 5,581, had been with the Memphis Police Department for 10 years. In those 10 years, he had accumulated 22 formal complaints, 15 filed by black residents, all describing the same pattern: equipment confiscation without documented cause, stops targeting individuals carrying professional gear in predominantly black neighborhoods, and a specific habit of labeling expensive property owned by black individuals as suspicious without any theft report, any serial number check, or any attempt at verification. Every complaint had been reviewed by the department's property crimes liaison. Every complaint had been closed. No equipment had ever been returned with an apology. No officer had ever been required to explain why the gear they confiscated consistently belonged to black creatives, contractors, and professionals. On the afternoon of September 17th, at 3:44 p.m., Saunders observed a black man on the corner of Lamar Avenue and Trigg, operating a Sony FX9 cinema camera mounted on a carbon fiber tripod with a Sennheiser audio rig, filming what appeared to be a documentary interview in progress. He did not run the equipment serial numbers through the stolen property database. He did not approach the individual and ask for identification before making a determination. He approached with his hand on his belt and his conclusion already formed. A black man with a $20,000 camera setup in a neighborhood he had decided such equipment had no business being in. What Brett Saunders did not know was that the man behind the camera was Isaiah Doyle, award-winning documentary filmmaker, Sundance-selected, MacArthur Fellow, whose most recent film had been screened in 41 countries and cited in 3 federal policy hearings, and that the camera Saunders was about to confiscate and damage contained 74 minutes of irreplaceable interview footage from a subject who had agreed to speak on camera for the first and only time, and that Isaiah Doyle was operating 3 cameras simultaneously that afternoon, and that Saunders' approach, his words, his escalation, and the sound of $20,000 worth of equipment hitting concrete were captured on all 3. Before we go any further, drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe a filmmaker should be able to document his own community without having his work destroyed by an officer who decided that black excellence in public looked like theft, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what Brett Saunders said on Lamar Avenue was recorded, and it survived everything he tried to do to stop it. Isaiah Doyle had been working on this film for 3 years. Not 3 years in the loose sense that creative people sometimes use 3 years of thinking about it, circling it, setting it aside. 3 years of active, consuming, unrelenting work. 3 years of building trust in a community that had every historical reason to distrust cameras. 3 years of showing up, of being present without an agenda visible enough to frighten the people he most needed to speak, of learning how to make himself and his equipment small enough that the truth in front of him could breathe without self-consciousness. The film was about Lamar Avenue. Specifically, it was about the 6-block stretch between Trigg and Person, which had been, in the 1950s and 1960s, the economic and cultural spine of one of Memphis's most vibrant black business districts, and which had been, by the combination of urban renewal policy, highway placement, and deliberate disinvestment, reduced over the following decades to a corridor that planning documents described with the bureaucratic neutrality of the word underserved. Isaiah had grown up 2 miles from Lamar Avenue. His grandmother had owned a dress shop on the block. The shop was gone. The building it occupied was a parking lot. He was making a film about what happened between the dress shop and the parking lot, and about the people who remembered the distance. He was 44 years old. He had studied film at Howard University, completed his MFA at NYU, and spent the first decade of his career making shorts and music videos for enough money to keep his equipment maintained and his rent paid and nothing left over. His breakthrough had come at 34, when his first feature documentary about the musicians who had recorded at Stax Records received a Sundance Special Jury Prize and a theatrical distribution deal that he would later describe as the first time in his professional life that his financial reality and his creative ambition had occupied the same time zone. The MacArthur Fellowship, the so-called Genius Grant, had come 4 years later. He had used it to fund the Lamar Avenue project completely independently. No studio, no network, no distributor who could tell him what the film needed to be in order to fit a slot. On September 17th, he was filming the most important interview of the 3-year project. His subject was a 79-year-old woman named Eloise Garner, who had run the neighborhood's pharmacy for 31 years before losing the building in 2003 to a tax assessment dispute she had never fully understood and had spent 20 years trying to explain to anyone who would listen. She had agreed to speak on camera only after 2 years of conversations. She had agreed to do it once, on her own terms, in front of her former storefront, now a vacant lot with a chain-link fence, because she wanted the record to show that she had stood there and said what she knew while she was still alive to say it. Isaiah had 3 cameras running. The Sony FX9 on the tripod was his primary, a cinema-grade camera he had purchased with the first MacArthur payment, the most expensive piece of equipment he owned, worth approximately $11,000 body only, with the lens configuration he was using. The second was a Sony A7S III on a secondary tripod to his left, running as a complementary angle. The third was a small Sony ZV-E10 clipped to a lightweight gorilla mount on the chain-link fence behind Eloise, capturing the reverse angle and ambient sound. Eloise Garner had been speaking for 41 minutes when Brett Saunders's patrol car slowed on Lamar Avenue. Saunders had been working the neighborhood for 4 years. He knew Lamar Avenue the way officers know streets. They patrol by its patterns, its regulars, its deviations. A man with a large camera on a tripod and a professional audio rig was a deviation. That was how he processed it. Not as a filmmaker, not as a professional. As a deviation in a neighborhood where deviations were, in his operating framework, things to be addressed. He pulled to the curb. He watched for 40 seconds. He saw a black man in a light jacket operating the primary camera. A black man in his 30s, Isaiah's assistant director, Kendrick Shaw, adjusting the secondary angle, and an elderly black woman speaking to the camera. He saw the equipment. He saw the carbon fiber tripod, the professional audio rig, the quality of the setup. He ran no database check. He made a call. He got out of the car. Isaiah heard the door. He did not stop recording. He had been filming in public spaces long enough to know that the approach of authority was itself information, and that the responsible thing to do with information was to document it. Saunders walked to within 6 feet of the primary camera and stopped. He looked at the setup. He looked at Isaiah. He looked at Kendrick. He looked at Eloise, who had stopped speaking mid-sentence and was watching the officer with the expression of a woman who had seen variations of this moment across 8 decades of living in Memphis. "Drop the equipment," Saunders said. "Right now. Set it down and step back." Isaiah kept his hands on the camera. He did not step back. He said, with the even tone of someone who had been in enough situations to know that the first 30 seconds established everything that followed. "This is my equipment. I'm filming a documentary. Nobody who looks like you owns gear like this," Saunders said. "Set it down, or I'm taking it as evidence of theft." The Sony FX9 was still recording. The A7S III on the secondary tripod was still recording. The ZV-E10 on the fence was still recording. Kendrick Shaw had his phone out and recording within 4 seconds of Saunders speaking. A woman named Patricia Odom, who had been walking her dog past the vacant lot and had stopped when she saw the patrol car, had her phone raised within 10 seconds of the second sentence. 3 cameras, 2 phones, 31 minutes of remaining battery on the primary. Isaiah looked at Saunders. He looked at the body cam on Saunders's chest. He said, "I need you to tell me what crime has been committed. The crime is you having $20,000 of camera equipment in this neighborhood. That's what's suspicious." End quote. Isaiah said, quietly, clearly, for every recording device within range. "You just said that on camera." Saunders's jaw tightened. He had said it with the confidence of someone who had made similar statements for 10 years and had never once experienced a consequence for doing so. I said, "Put it down." Isaiah did not put it down. He said, "I am a documentary filmmaker. This equipment is registered in my name. The serial numbers are on file with my production insurance carrier. I have a business license for commercial film production in the state of Tennessee. I have not committed any crime, and you have not stated any crime. I am asserting my right to continue my lawful professional activity." End quote. End quote. End quote. Saunders stepped forward. He reached for the camera with both hands, not for Isaiah, not to detain him, but for the camera itself. Isaiah stepped laterally, positioning his body between Saunders's reach and the primary camera in the same instinctive, protective motion that anyone who has spent 3 years building something performs when that thing is threatened. Saunders grabbed Isaiah's arm. He pulled him off balance. The tripod, the carbon fiber tripod holding a Sony FX9 with 74 minutes of Eloise Garner's irreplaceable testimony, tipped. The ball head didn't lock fast enough. The camera separated from the mount. It hit the concrete of the Lamar Avenue sidewalk at 3:51 p.m. The sound it made was captured on all 3 cameras and both phones. A hard, specific, irreversible sound. Eloise Garner said, from behind the chain-link fence, in the voice of a woman who had watched too many things be broken on this block to be surprised by one more, "Lord, have mercy." Isaiah did not move toward Saunders. He did not raise his voice. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at his primary camera on the concrete, and then looked at Saunders and said the only thing that needed to be said in that moment. "Every frame you just spoke over is still recording. And when this is over, the whole world is going to see exactly what you said and exactly what it costs you." Saunders looked at the camera on the ground. He looked at the secondary camera on the tripod to his left, its red recording light still active. He looked at Kendrick Shaw's phone. He looked at Patricia Odom's phone. He looked at the small camera mounted to the fence behind Eloise Garner, its indicator light blinking steadily. He had been wrong about one thing from the beginning. The equipment wasn't stolen, but more relevant than that, for what came next, the footage wasn't gone. Isaiah retrieved the primary camera from the concrete. The body had cracked at the left corner. The lens, a Zeiss CP 3 prime worth $4,200, had separated from the mount, and the front element was shattered. The memory card was intact. He removed it with hands that were completely steady and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He looked at Saunders. "I need your badge number," he said. "I need your supervisor's contact information. And I need you to understand that you just physically interfered with a commercial film production, damaged property with a documented replacement value of over $15,000, and made a racially explicit statement about the ownership of that property that was recorded by 5 separate devices." He paused. "I want your supervisor here, now." Saunders was looking at the memory card disappearing into Isaiah's pocket with the expression of someone who had just understood, too late, that the thing they had believed they were preventing had already happened and was already elsewhere. He called his supervisor. Sergeant Angela Reeves arrived at 4:09 p.m. She stepped out of her vehicle and walked to the scene. A cracked cinema camera on the sidewalk, a shattered lens, 2 tripods, a professional audio rig, an elderly woman sitting in a folding chair behind a chain-link fence, 2 men with phones still recording, and one of her officers standing with the particular stillness of someone who has run out of ways to frame their next sentence. She looked at the equipment. She looked at Saunders. She looked at Isaiah. Isaiah handed her his business card. MacArthur Fellow, documentary filmmaker, 3-line filmography that included a Sundance Prize. She read it. She looked at Saunders. Badge, she said. Sarge, I was responding to. Badge, no. Saunders unclipped his badge from his uniform. He held it for a moment, the Memphis PD shield, 10 years of service, the physical emblem of the authority he had just used to destroy something irreplaceable. He placed it in Reeves's outstretched hand. Then, his weapon cleared, slide locked back, placed in the evidence bag she produced. The weight of both leaving his possession was visible in the way he stood afterward. Smaller. The particular smallness of someone stripped of the thing they had been using in place of judgment. Reeves told him to go to his vehicle and stay there. She turned to Isaiah. Mr. Doyle, I apologize for what happened here. What do you need from me right now? I need this incident formally documented, with exact timestamps from the moment Officer Saunders exited his vehicle. I need his body cam footage, his dash cam footage, and all department radio communications preserved immediately. I need the department's property damage claim process initiated for the equipment destroyed. And I need contact information for the Memphis Police Department's legal division. He looked at the cracked camera on the sidewalk. And I need someone to tell Eloise Garner that I'm coming back, that her testimony is safe, and that we're going to finish the interview. Eloise Garner, from her folding chair behind the chain-link fence, said, I heard you, baby. I'll be here. The Memphis Police Department's internal affairs investigation opened within 24 hours and was completed in 18 days. The evidence required no interpretation. Saunders's body cam footage was unambiguous. The approach without stated cause, the statement about nobody who looks like you, the reach for privately owned equipment, the physical contact that caused the tripod to tip, the sound of the camera hitting concrete. The 3 production cameras and 2 civilian phones provided coverage from every angle. The combined footage was reviewed by internal affairs investigators, by the department's legal counsel, and by a senior officer from the department's property crimes division, who confirmed in writing that no stolen property report matching Isaiah's equipment had existed in the department's database at any point before, during, or after the incident. Saunders's complaint history was reviewed in full. 22 complaints, 15 from black residents, all closed. The Internal Affairs report documented a finding that the department's legal team received and forwarded directly to the city attorney's office without comment because no comment was necessary. Saunders had a 10-year history of equipment confiscation targeting black individuals in specific Memphis neighborhoods, a history that had been documented, reviewed, and dismissed 22 times, and that had culminated in the physical destruction of a MacArthur Fellow's professional equipment on a public sidewalk while he was engaged in lawful commercial activity. Saunders was terminated 44 days after the incident. His Tennessee law enforcement certification was referred to the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. The commission reviewed the body cam footage, the complaint history, and the property destruction finding, permanent revocation. His pension, 10 years of contributions, was reviewed under the department's misconduct forfeiture provisions and forfeited in full. His application to 3 neighboring county departments was denied. Each background check returned the footage and the termination. He found work eventually in a commercial cleaning company in Shelby County. His name returns 290,000 search results. The first result is the compilation of all 5 recording angles edited together that Isaiah Doyle uploaded to his production company's YouTube channel 16 days after the incident. It has been viewed 34 million times. The civil lawsuit was filed by Isaiah Doyle through a Memphis civil rights firm with a specific practice in First Amendment and property rights cases involving law enforcement interference with journalism and creative work. The complaint named Saunders personally and the Memphis Police Department institutionally, alleging violation of First Amendment rights, specifically the right to film in public spaces, intentional destruction of private property, racial discrimination in the exercise of law enforcement authority, and the institutional failure to address a documented pattern of equipment confiscation targeting Black individuals. The lawsuit's institutional claim was anchored in the complaint history: 22 documented instances, 15 involving Black individuals, all closed without meaningful review. The city settled 14 months after the incident, $2.9 million. The city's liability carrier contributed $1.6 million, reflecting the institutional failure to address Saunders's complaint history before it reached a MacArthur Fellow's equipment on a public sidewalk. The department contributed $800,000. Saunders's personal liability was assessed at $500,000, covering the equipment replacement value, the production costs associated with interrupted filming, and the calculated harm to the project's timeline. His assets were attached. He did not have $500,000. The judgment followed him. Isaiah Doyle donated $1.4 million of the settlement proceeds to 3 organizations and 1 initiative he built himself. $600,000 established the Lamar Avenue Documentary Fund, a grant program providing production funding to Black documentary filmmakers working in Memphis and the Mid-South, with specific priority for films documenting communities that had experienced urban displacement, economic disinvestment, or the erasure of cultural history. The fund's first grant cycle supported 7 filmmakers. 2 of them were documenting streets adjacent to Lamar Avenue. $500,000 went to the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, specifically designated for their law enforcement interference documentation program, which tracked incidents of police interference with journalists and filmmakers nationally and provided legal support to those who could not otherwise afford to fight back. $300,000 established a production equipment lending library at the Memphis College of Art, professional-grade cameras, tripods, audio equipment, and editing workstations available to students and emerging independent filmmakers at no cost. The library was named for Eloise Garner, who had agreed to be interviewed a second time in front of her former storefront on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with 2 cameras running and nobody on the sidewalk who didn't belong there. The Tennessee Documentary Filmmaker Protection Act, introduced in the state legislature 8 months after the incident, established that any law enforcement officer who confiscated, damaged, or attempted to seize recording equipment from an individual engaged in lawful filming activity without a documented verified theft report would face automatic external review, mandatory restitution, and potential criminal liability for destruction of property. The act further required all law enforcement agencies in the state to include First Amendment filming rights in annual mandatory training, with specific case studies drawn from documented incidents of equipment confiscation. The Lamar Avenue incident was included in the curriculum by name. Brett Saunders's statement, "Nobody who looks like you owns gear like this," was transcribed in the training materials as the exact kind of statement the act was designed to prevent. The Lamar Avenue documentary was completed 11 months after the incident. It premiered at Sundance the following January and received the Grand Jury Prize for U.S. Documentary. Eloise Garner attended the premiere in Park City, Utah, wearing a dress she had made herself. She was 80 years old. She had never been to Utah. She sat in the 3rd row and watched herself speak on a screen in a darkened theater full of strangers, saying what she had spent 20 years trying to say, and she did not wipe her eyes until the credits finished rolling. The film opens with Eloise mid-sentence, the exact sentence she was delivering when Brett Saunders's patrol car slowed on Lamar Avenue. It does not cut away. It does not explain the interruption. It continues to the moment the camera hits the concrete, the sound of it, and then after 7 seconds of black, it continues again. The interview resumes. Eloise speaks for another 33 minutes. The film uses all of it. After the Sundance screening, a reporter asked Isaiah why he had chosen to include the footage of the confrontation rather than cutting around it. He thought about the question for a moment. "Because the confrontation is the film," he said. "Everything that happened on Lamar Avenue for the last 70 years is in that sound, the camera hitting the concrete. The assumption that what we build can be taken from us. The insistence that it can't. He paused. The footage survived. The testimony survived. The film is the proof that it survived. He returned to Memphis the following month. He drove down Lamar Avenue on a Tuesday afternoon with the windows down. He stopped at the corner of Lamar and Trigg and sat in the car for a while. The chain-link fence was still there. The vacant lot was still there. The sidewalk, where the camera had landed, was still there. He got out. He walked to the corner. He stood there for a few minutes in the afternoon light. Then he went to work. If you believe a filmmaker should be able to document his own community without having his work destroyed by an officer who decided his success looked like theft, share this story. What legal protections should exist to prevent law enforcement from interfering with journalists and documentary filmmakers? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe 34 million people watching that footage is what accountability looks like when the system refuses to provide it first, subscribe. We are not stopping until nobody who looks like you is a sentence that ends any career before it ends any conversation.